Hello, my name is Phil Clothier and welcome to this session. I want to thank the IOC for asking me to deliver this session called Values, a Foundation for Well-Being and Happiness. I'd like to start with the idea that as human beings we really only have two jobs. And the first one is to figure out our values and become a living and loving expression of those values in action. And the second is to figure out our purpose and dedicate our lives to fulfilling whatever that purpose is. Now for this video, I'm going to focus on the values piece of that and how that shows up in our lives individually and as in our teams and as whole organizations and even as nations. The lady in this photograph is Elizabeth Sartoris. She's an evolutionary biologist and she talks about the evolution of humanity down to two things. One is the opposable thumb, the ability to manipulate tools, and the second is storytelling. And when we tell stories, we open up possibilities in each other's lives. So when I hear that you just did that and I say, oh, I didn't even know that was possible, and now what was impossible to me before has now become a possibility in my life as well. So let me tell you some of this material about values through the medium of stories. And let's start with Iceland, Iceland the nation, and in 2008 we were asked to measure the values and culture of Iceland. In this picture here, you can see the personal values of the people of Iceland, how they see the culture now, and the values they would desire for their nation. And my colleague Richard Barrett was on Icelandic TV presenting these results, and they said, well, give us your headline analysis. What would you say about these results? And he said, if Iceland were an organization, I'd say you are going bankrupt just about now. And in fact, 2 weeks later, Iceland went through its economic collapse. But that's not the end of the story, because since then, in 2009 and 2010, and now again in 2014, we're measuring the values of Iceland on an ongoing basis, and they bring together citizens and government members and leaders of institutions to really talk about how they really build a whole nation based on the values of the people. Now I'd like to show you how values show up and work in organizations. And I'm going to show you through the tale of two organizations. And on the screen you'll see Organization A and Organization B. They're both in the finance industry working under exactly the same market conditions with a similar number of employees and share portfolio. And we asked the employees of both these organizations select the values that most reflect how your organization currently operates. And if we look at how the employees in Organization A answered, they said, we see this organization stands for client satisfaction, making a difference, integrity, teamwork, humor, fun, quality, ethics, and financial stability. As you'll see in the picture, there's a spread of dots across every level, and we call this full spectrum consciousness. The organization is taking care of all its needs, from basic survival needs up to how it makes a difference for people. In Organization B, we see a very different scenario. When we ask the employees to select the values that most reflect how their organization operates, we see blame, short-term focus, internal competition, buck passing, risk-averse, customer satisfaction, information hoarding, and profit. Now the white dots in this picture represent what we call potentially limiting values. They're a representation of fear showing up in the system. And it only takes two white dots for us to see that the fear will be harming the ability to have really fulfilled employees, happy customers, and for the organization to be delivering on whatever its mission is. Now in this situation, what we see is a toxic culture where it's very likely that people will be getting both physically and mentally sick. Now, there's one other aspect to this measurement I'd like to show you, which is something we call cultural entropy. And this is the total percentage of all the limiting values within the system. Now in Organization A, the top values were all positive ones, but down below there may have been some values like bureaucracy, or hierarchy, or confusion. But on the right-hand side, with all these potentially limiting values showing up in the top, we see a cultural entropy of 57%. That means that 57% of all the values the employees picked were for these unhealthy, fear-based values. And what that means is that 57% of all the energy within the system is going into non-productive and even destructive stuff. Now, Are these values? And you could argue that they're not really values, they're more like behaviors. However, if I take the value of blame, if I blame you, at that moment I'm probably feeling a little bit more safe. So I'm valuing the outcome that comes from it rather than the action itself or the word itself. So let me say a little bit more about cultural entropy. And as I said, cultural entropy measures the percentage of fear, dysfunction, negative and destructive energy within the system. Anything below 10% we consider to be healthy. Anything over 40% we consider to be crisis situation, and often see organizations go bankrupt or fail above that level. And if we go back to our Iceland story, 53% of all the values in Iceland were potentially limiting values. It had a 53% cultural entropy, which is one of the clues that told us that things were not going well there. Many organizations have developed core values and put great posters on the wall to describe what those values are. The question is, are those company values lived or are they not lived? And we're also able to see that in our results. So firstly, I want to show you this organization. It's a hospital whose values spell I care, integrity, compassion, accountability, respect, and excellence. And you can see in the results of the values assessment a very low entropy score, and also 4 of those 5 limiting values showing up in the top 10. Now this to me is an absolute sign that the leaders are walking the talk and the organization is living these core values. If I look at this second organization, we'll find that they say our core values are client collaboration, teamwork, delivery, meritocracy, and integrity. And what we only find is one of those showing up in the current culture, and that's client collaboration. And when they talk about teamwork, what they really have is confusion and silo mentality. And when they talk about meritocracy, what they have is hierarchy and arrogance. And so you can see this is a very clear message that these core values are not being lived. Now this last case, I want to go a little bit deeper into this to show you the different perspectives we can create as well. So with this same organization, we ask the executive team select the values that most reflect how the organization operates. And on the right-hand side, you'll see we ask the employees the same question. Select the values that reflect how this organization operates. They're both picking values that describe the same organization, but their perspectives, their view are radically different. Now, which is right and which is wrong? Actually, it's possible that both of these could be true. It's their real experience, but their experiences are so radically different. And I have to tell you that when this executive team found out what was going on, what the employees experienced, they were shocked. And they dug in over the next 2 years to transform the culture to one that was much more alive and aligned with the values of their people. I'd now like to introduce you to the 7 levels of consciousness through a story. And I'm going to be telling you a story of what it would be like to be in an organization where all these levels were true and healthy. And normally when I do this, I ask people in the room to stand up when it's true for them in their organization that they feel close to or work with. And if it's not true, I ask them to sit down. So since we're on video, maybe that's not going to work so well, but I would ask you in your mind to think about, would I be standing up? Is this true for me? Or should I sit down? Is this not true for me? And so let's start. Level 1 is called survival, financial viability and employee safety. Imagine a company that's conscious and fair in the way it sets prices and pay. Because it's moved beyond fear-driven greed, it's now profitable, financially stable, and creates good shareholder return. It also provides safe and comfortable working conditions for its people. So I ask you, would you be standing up? Is that true for you in the organization that you're with? Or would you be sitting down? Is that not true? And now let's look at level 2, which is called relationships. When people walk into the office each day, they smile and greet each other warmly. There's a healthy sense of respect, and customers feel well looked after. Level 3, which is called self-esteem. This organization invests in high-performing systems. It trains its people to be excellent at doing their jobs, and staff are proud to tell others who they work for. Again, would you be standing up or sitting down at this point? Level 4. This is the level of transformation. This is an organization that moves forward through innovation and continuous improvement. It has the resilience and adaptability to weather tough times. People feel empowered and have the courage to ask tough questions. It's okay to make mistakes. Level 5 is the level of internal cohesion, where we really create trust and connection with people inside the organization. People feel inspired by the vision and the values. There are high levels of trust and a deep sense of purpose, fun, and team spirit. Level 6 is making a difference, where we step beyond the boundary of the organization. This is a collaborative working environment for staff, customers, suppliers, and the community, where people focus on win-win for all concerned. The investment in leadership development means that leaders are making a sustainable difference inside and outside the organization. And finally, we find level 7, where making a difference becomes a way of life and we truly live a life of service. For this group, ethics is not about compliance, but truly doing what they believe is right deep down in their hearts. There is a knowing that by doing their jobs, people are serving society and future generations. So I just want to step back a little bit and tell you about how we run this survey. We really just asked 3 questions. The first question is, select the values and behaviors that most reflect who you are, not who you desire to become. We want to know who the human beings are and what's most important to them. The second question is about the current culture. Select the values that most reflect how your organization currently operates. And the third question is, select the values you would desire for your organization to achieve its highest performance. So there's really just 3 questions in this survey. It's very simple and quick to answer. And this is what a full result looks like, where you can see on the left-hand side the personal values of the people in the organization. In the middle, you can see the current culture, the values that they're experiencing now, and the picture that creates in terms of positive values, the blue dots, and the white dots, which are the potentially limiting values. And on the right-hand side, the desired culture. And what this provides is a powerful foundation for focused dialogue, and then for transformation. As part of this program, I'd like you to have a direct experience of your own personal values. And a couple of years ago, we created the Personal Values Assessment and made it free to everybody on the planet, because we believe that it's vital that everybody has the opportunity to explore this question of who am I and what's most important to me? Because our values every day affect our thinking and our words and our actions. Our hope is that through this, people really become conscious of what their values are and conscious of the decisions they're making each day. So please go to our website, valuescenter.com/PVA, and take a free values assessment, and you'll get the results in just a few minutes. Welcome back. This next segment is called Cultural Transformation Through Dialogue. What I'd like to do is share with you some real examples of organizations who've had challenges that they've been able to overcome, and also the financial impact of getting this wrong. Let's start with a case study of a technology company. I've changed the name, I call them CBD Technology. But you can see the real results here about the personal values, how the people experience the culture now, and what they'd like for the future. Now here's a really interesting story, because this company was just about to implement 2 new expensive projects. One was a time clock system for people checking in and out of work, and the other was an expenses control system. And they were just about to invest in these systems, and they got the results of the values assessment, and what they found was the personal values of the people, where they stood for honesty, commitment, reliability, integrity, and trust. And the leaders said, what are we doing? We're just about to spend £1 million on 2 systems that tell our people we don't trust them. And they're telling us that trust is built into the core of their being. Let's stop doing this. And they scrapped those 2 investments, and they told their people what they were doing. And that started the foundation of a new transformation in their organization. So understanding the personal values of people and how they want to show up and be is a vital part of any transformation that will take place. It was also in CBT that we started to discover the financial impact of getting it wrong. And with all the potentially limiting values such as bureaucracy and confusion and empire building, we asked people to say how much productivity personally are they losing from these things showing up, and how much opportunity is being lost as well. And we asked them to give specific examples, and unless they could give a specific example, they had to score 0. Now we averaged all of those numbers and gave them back to the executive team, and we said, we don't mind how you calculate this, but based on these numbers, you figure out how much this is costing your organization. Well, they came back and they said that on an annual income of £33 million, they were losing somewhere in the region of £13 million to these potentially limiting values, to the cultural entropy. Now, we don't know this is an accurate number. It could be 15 million or 10 million, but what we do know is this number was so significant, it woke them up to the reality of what running an organization with high cultural entropy looks like, and the downside to that. And once again, they started the work necessary to bring those changes about. Many people get stuck with the whole idea of transformation because it just feels like a complex and difficult field. Well, yes, it can be, but we can also simplify it and make it very practical and visible. So let's just step through these processes of creating true dialogue as a foundation for transformation. We start with a values assessment so that everybody's voice is heard. Who are they? How do they see the culture? How would they like the culture to be? And whether you have an organization of 10 people or 10,000 people, the next step always is to share the results and ask people what these values mean. Really get into dialogue around this. And the next step, step 3, is to prioritize key focus values. In any strategy, in any system, to try and do more than 3 major things at any time is a mistake, and it's the same in culture. So focus on the main things that are really important, and you'll find that as you start to fix those things, other issues around them will also start to heal themselves. So step 3, focus on the key priority values. Step 4, once we know what those key priorities are, they may be bringing in new values that we want to create, like trust, or they may be letting go of things we don't want anymore, like confusion or bureaucracy. But once we know what they are, and we've got those priorities, now we're going to explore those in real detail. What does that mean, and how do we truly bring those to life in the organization? So that's step 4. And step 5, we create a plan. We say, well, what are we going to do? And when are we going to do it? And who's responsible for that? And how we know it's going to be done? And then we get to section 6, which is really about putting this into practice and living it. And this is an annual cyclical process, so that once you've integrated those 3 new priorities, you start again and you say, what's the next part of our journey? Many people ask me what the core factor that's going to affect whether transformation can happen or not. And my answer is, well, it's the sparkle in the eye of the chief executive. And what I mean by that is, it's really the willingness of the executive team to do their own personal work and get into the work that's necessary to transform an entire organization. And we have some great case studies. We're working in nearly 100 countries with organizations of all sorts of shapes and sizes and from different industries, and even communities and nations. So let me just share with you a few of those case studies. Unilever in Brazil wanted to transform their business performance, but also the engagement with their employees. And through this process, they were able to do both of those things. Black Hawk Healthcare in the USA were truly in crisis with a cultural entropy of 56%. And over the course of 3 years, they pulled that down to 14%, which is really in that healthy range. And the benefits that came through in terms of increased revenues and connection with their employees and the difference they were making in society were remarkable. We're also supporting community dialogue in Sweden with the municipalities, where citizens and civil servants and politicians are talking about what's most important and changing things to create the life conditions that are good for all. We were asked to measure the values and culture of Latvia, and I've just pulled out the desired culture for 2 groups. Those native Latvians living in the country and Russians who live in Latvia. And at the time, these 2 groups were really not getting on well at all. But we looked at, well, what did they both want? And you can see the orange words on this chart show the common desired culture that both groups wanting to aim for. And we discovered a key factor here, that beliefs divide and values unite. When we work at the level of beliefs, we find out what divides us and what holds us apart and why we should kind of not trust that other person over there. When we get down to the level of values, we find out what connects us. And if we can have the dialogue on that level, then we can create true community transformation and cohesion. And in fact, in Latvia, they started dialogue between teenagers from the two different groups, Latvians and Russians, to really start to weave the community together. Now, in the last segment, I offered you the personal values assessment. In this one, I'd like to offer you a free book called Get Connected. It's a book with tools and materials and exercises that anybody can run inside their teams and organizations to transform performance. I know that IOC is strongly connected with ISEC, and you might be interested to know that we have an ISEC specific edition of this, which can be downloaded from the ISEC website too. This last segment is called From Fear to Trust and Love. And we saw earlier in this session how those limiting values like blame and bureaucracy and greed all come from the fears that we hold inside of ourselves and then pervade the systems that we're within. Well, let's see how that works and what we can do about it. One of our core mantras is organizational transformation starts with the personal transformation of the leaders. And as well as measuring whole organizations, we can measure individual leaders as well through a 360-degree feedback process. In this picture, on the left-hand side, you'll see a leadership values assessment result where 14 assessors gave feedback on their leader, and 11 people said, "We see you standing for power," and 10 people said blame, and 10 people said demanding and manipulative, and controlling and arrogant and authoritarian and exploitative and ruthless. Now, as you can see, this isn't a very pretty picture. But on the right-hand side, we also measured the culture of the organization, and guess what we found? We found lots of potentially limiting values. So the fears of the leader were showing up in the culture of the organization, and this is a pattern we see time after time. Now, the good news is this leader was willing to listen to the feedback from the employees, and through coaching was able to make significant shifts in their own beliefs over the following year. But let's look at it from another perspective. Here's two real results of a leader and the culture of that organization. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see that this leader stands for continuous learning. 11 people said continuous learning. 11 people said generosity. 10 people said commitment and positive attitude. And you can read all those other words there. And guess what we found in the current culture? We found it was a current culture that also stood for those positive values, and it was a great place to be with high performance. So where do these potentially limiting values, these fear-based values, come from? And while I joke about this, I can show you that the sum of all human fears fit into one single tweet. And they are, I don't have enough, I'm not loved enough, and I'm not enough. And in fact, that's just 63 characters. And all other fears are a subset of these three fears showing up in individuals, in families, in teams, in organizations, in communities, and even whole nations. And so let's look at how this works. If we go back to the model, we'll find at level 1, which is about survival, I don't have enough. And this is, I don't have enough money, safety, protection, health, food, etc. to satisfy my need for survival. So that's the level 1 existential fears of, am I safe enough? Do I have what I need just to survive? At level 2, this is about relationships, and the statement is, I'm not loved enough. I do not have enough love, caring, attention to satisfy my need for belonging. That's that core human need to feel a sense of belonging. And thirdly, and in some senses this can be one of the most difficult ones to overcome, because this is stories we tell ourselves, I'm not enough. I do not have enough power, authority, or respect to satisfy my need for self-esteem. And this shows up daily for some people who say, oh, I'm not good enough, or that person's so much better than I am. And of course, these are all stories. So what does all this mean? I'd like to share a phrase with you that simply says, consciousness creates matter. Or if you put it another way, thoughts become things. We are what we think. And so if we think positive thoughts and we think about how we can create great teams, that's what we will create. If we think negatively and we think about how people hate us and how difficult life is, then that's exactly what we're going to create. Now we have the possibility to truly create heaven on earth. And we also have the possibility to create hell on earth. This photograph was taken in the summer of 2014 at the height of the recent war between Palestine and Israel. And the caption of the photograph was Hell on Earth. This is a real example of how these core beliefs, I don't have enough, I'm not loved enough, and I'm not enough, show up in a devastating way in society. I'd like to finish with one final story. Soon after the revolution in Egypt, I was visiting, and on the last day of the visit, I heard that in a town very close to us, as the Muslims went to pray in the square at lunchtime, the Christians had formed a protective ring around them by holding hands to protect the Muslims as they prayed. And a few hours later, as the Christians of the town went to the church to pray, the Muslims held hands and formed a protective ring around them as they prayed. In the height of the fear and the distrust and the division, people chose to take a stand from a place of love. And that's what I ask you to do. When things get difficult, go back to your core values, what holds you rooted in who you truly are, and take a stand from a place of love. Thank you.